Deadpool and Wolverine is premiering in theaters right now and promises not only to continue the anti-hero saga, but also to bring Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine. Will the movie be able to exceed expectations? Did Mickey really let Ryan Reynolds make an R-rated film? Is the MCU finally saved? I don't know. What I do know is that I thought it would be cool to remember the best games we've had with those two characters, especially since they are somewhat forgotten nowadays. So let's go. Starting with our favorite Gulo Gulo, Wolverine, also known as Logan, is one of Marvel Comics' most iconic characters. Debuting in The Incredible Hulk 180 in 1974, he's a mutant with enhanced senses, a rapid healing factor, retractable claws, and a skeleton reinforced with the unbreakable fictional metal adamantium. Known for his gruff demeanor and mysterious past, Wolverine is also a member of the X-Men. With such a long existence, he has appeared in several games over the years, but the best of them is without a doubt X-Men Origins Wolverine, specifically the Uncaged Edition, released for PS3, 360, and PCs in 2009. I remember playing the PS2 version when I was a kid and even liking that game. At the time, I didn't even know there was a better version with an M rating, but since I played the Uncaged Edition for the first time a few years later, I have considered it as one of the best superhero games ever. I wasn't sure if this statement aged well, and since it had been around 12 years since the last time I played, I decided to give it a go again for this video. X-Men Origins Wolverine is a hack and slash based on the terrible movie of the same name, and the game's story follows a mix of the film and in its main moments, with a script created by Raven Software. It's important to note that Hugh Jackman himself lent his voice to the game, and he did a decent job. According to Jackman, this was the most extensive voice work he had ever done. Another notable influence in the game was the God of War series. Some mechanics and movements are clearly similar to those of Kratos, but despite this, the game manages to have its own identity, and I wouldn't consider it as a generic copy of GOW. If there's one word that defines the Uncaged Edition, well, it's visceral. This is evident in the first cutscene made by the incredible talented Blur Studio. The game spares no frenetic and exaggerated violence. Something that always bothered me in some portrayals of Wolverine is that we didn't always have the chance to see him being violent. It was quite common, especially in more child-friendly productions, for Logan not to use his claws against humans, opting for punches or kicks instead. But the nature of his powers is violent. The guy has claws made of a practically indestructible metal alloy. He says he's literally the best at what he does, which is killing people, even though, according to him, that's not exactly a nice thing. The aftermath of a fight involving Wolverine would not be pretty, and that's exactly what this game offers. The name of this version translates this very well. Wolverine is uncaged, and we finally had the chance to experience his most brutal version possible. As a good hack and slash, the game has many combos to unlock, but not an intimidating number like in Devil May Cry, for example. Just like in God of War, there are light, heavy, and grab attacks, but one way to differentiate the combat from other games is the lunge, and I'll simply never get tired of it. To keep the player engaged, we gain new special abilities throughout the playthrough. The animations of the moves and executions stand out for being fluid and gory. And depending on where Wolverine strikes, different parts of the enemies can be severed. As if that wasn't enough, it is still possible to use the environment itself to kill enemies with explosive barrels or spikes, for example. Another way in which the violence manifests in this game is in Logan's own body. As you already know, another power Wolverine has is his healing factor, and the game portrays this in an incredible way. Just like in the comics, Wolverine in this game takes bullets, stabbings, beatings, and even gets blown up. Each damage received can be reflected all over his body, and in a few seconds you can see the wounds healing in real time. I honestly don't know how Raven managed to implement this back then, and don't understand why we don't see this kind of mechanic in more games nowadays. Something I didn't remember was how challenging the game is. If you stay idle for a few seconds, you'll be punished. The game encourages the player to keep moving and be on the offensive, but to know when to block or dodge. Dying is pretty easy, especially at the beginning, but over time, Wolverine gets stronger and you can buy upgrades that make the gameplay even more interesting. To balance this, the game introduces different and more challenging versions of enemies. However, it sometimes suffers from the excessive reuse of some mini-bosses. Speaking of challenging enemies, one of the game's strengths is the boss battles. I will not spoil them here. Many of them are scenes from the movie, though much more fun. But fortunately, there's some original battles as well. Despite the game being well received at the time, earning a general score of around 7 out of 10, it had some criticisms. The main ones were due to the game's repetitiveness and linearity, and unfortunately I have to agree. It's a hack and slash, of course, and not every game has to have huge open worlds, but at certain moments, the number of enemies and the amount of battles one after another can be tiring. The game tries to break this with some exploration, for example. Something that might encourage exploration is trying to find all the secret collectibles to unlock special challenges that rewards Wolverine's classic outfits. Beyond that, the game also tries to add a bit of variety to the gameplay by adding platforming segments and some puzzles, but they are few and quite obvious most of the time. So in short, pacing is an issue. Another criticism that could be made is regarding the characters' models, which already looked a bit dated at the time. Also, be aware that if you're looking for a strong story, you'll be disappointed. It's just okay. Clearly not the focus, and unfortunately, it follows much of one of the worst superhero movies ever made. I understand that the game is a tie-in into the film, but I would have liked to see more original parts. Another bummer is that the game was removed from all digital stores in 2014 due to expiration of Activision's contract with Marvel, and nowadays the only ways to play it are if you bought it back then by purchasing a used copy online or through alternative means. It's sincerely sad to see such a fun game forgotten due to contractual issues. I miss those days when games weren't absurdly expensive to make, and we had this kind of AA move-based game intended to simply entertain and amuse. Wolverine is literally the most famous X-Men of all, and this was his last solo game to date. Let's hope and cross our fingers that the Insomniac game honors the character's legacy and gives us an even better game, because he surely deserves it.
We killed the bastard!
I can't believe it! He's dead! Yeah, we did it! Target is
Command!
down!
Weapon X is dead! I repeat, Weapon X is dead!
Hey, somebody take my picture!
Be sure to send me a copy.
Shit, he's alive!
Let's go!
Talking now about Deadpool, well, I'll let him introduce himself.
Deadpool, branded as both hero and villain. Deadpool was once a badass mercenary named Wade Wilson. After being recruited into the Weapon X program, Wade was subjected to experiments that gave him awesome regenerative powers and drove him batshit crazy. Today, the Merc with a mouth travels the globe in search of fortune and chimichangas.
Thanks, Wade. Deadpool had his own game originally released in 2013, developed by High Moon Studios, and of course, it's got a M rating. Just like with X-Men Origins Wolverine, I hadn't played Deadpool since its release, and decided to revisit just to see how the game aged. The game is a mix of hack and slash with third-person shooter and even has some short stealth and platforming segments. The script is mostly original and doesn't adapt any specific story of the anti-hero, although the whole game is filled with Marvel references and Easter eggs. One thing that becomes clear right from the start is the game's meta humor. Deadpool knows he's a fictional character, and what starts the story is his desire to have his own video game. Throughout the game, he constantly references High Moon Studios and its developers.
My God, what the? Why is this happening?
We need to make a quick phone call.
Peter, it's Deadpool. What the hell is High Moon doing to my game?
Another example is early in the game when he calls Nolan North, one of the most famous voice actors in the US, known for voicing characters like Nathan Drake, for example, who also voices Deadpool in this game.
Nolan! Hey, what's up, buddy? We're making a game about me. We gotta have you do the VO, man. I mean, see, here's the thing. People tell me we sound alike.
That sounds awesome, Deadpool. Listen, I had a different take on it. Maybe we just make you, maybe it's an alternative type of Deadpool. He's somebody that's like, forget the boobs, let's just go for pecs. Pecs and biceps. Forget girls. Why don't you just contact my agent for the booking and we'll see what we can do.
He's so in.
The self-referential humor and the constant breaking of the fourth wall, jokes, and absurd scenes are the game's strong points. Just as a Deadpool game should be, this game has a completely depraved, dirty, and politically incorrect sense of humor. It's worth noting that the game was released before the first Deadpool movie, and although since his creation in the comics, he's been known for chattering non-stop, making jokes, and being aware he's a fictional character, this game took Deadpool to the limit of absurdity, sometimes even nearing a cartoon character like Bugs Bunny. An interesting narrative feature that High Moon found was the inclusion of voices in Deadpool's head. This further highlights the character's insanity in a unique way, and since each voice has its own personality, it's always funny to hear their comments throughout the game.
Hey, there's Rogue. Okay, so we need to get our ass across this river of shit somehow.
Any ideas?
Think, think, think.
Wait, do that again.
Do what?
That!
Oh,
We can use our bubbles.
to jump across. Well, isn't that handy?
In the plot, we find several famous and important Marvel characters, such as Cable and Wolverine himself. Their interactions with Deadpool are honestly the best parts of the game. These characters are responsible for trying to bring seriousness and develop the story, which involves thwarting Mr. Sinister's plans and saving the world. But Deadpool simply doesn't take this story seriously, and neither should you. All he wants is a cool game with violence, explosions, money, babes, and of course, chimichangas. Okay, I think I should finally talk about the gameplay. It is fine. I don't want to say it isn't fun, because it is, but in my opinion, it's the game's biggest stumble, as it's a hack and slash and could have been better in this regard. In the game, Deadpool has a large arsenal of weapons like swords, guns, and grenades. In theory, this would already bring a certain versatility to the combat, but I feel it lacked a bit of polish and depth in this part. The best way I found to describe the combat is loose, imprecise, and lacking impact. And although it's violent, the combat doesn't have the exaggerated brutality we would expect from a Deadpool game. A cool little detail is that Wade can also regenerate his wounds quickly, and actually, I wonder if High Moon had access to the tech used in X-Men Origins Wolverine, because they look really similar. The combat revolves around combos, but unlike Devil May Cry, where the goal is to be as stylish as possible, here the important thing is to keep them long. The more hits, the more points you earn, and with those points, you can buy upgrades, abilities, and even weapons for the mercenary. The melee combat is decent, but ends up being a bit too shallow. I would personally have liked more combos, even if it improves a bit when you buy all the upgrades and start mixing different weapons. Still in the melee part, something the game also really needed was better aerial combat. The gun mechanics are a bit frustrating because they are very imprecise. I would have liked an auto-aim mode like in DMC, so he could focus only on keeping the combos and not having to fight with the aim. Yes, the game has a lock-on, but for it to work you simply can't move the right stick or the aim assist gets lost. Plus, every time you use your firearms, the camera zooms in too much on Deadpool and you lose much of your peripheral vision. In the comics, sometimes Deadpool also uses a belt that allows him to teleport, but unfortunately, in the game, this translates into a short dodge where DP disappears and is invulnerable for a second. This mechanic is disappointing because it had the potential to be much more interesting. Imagine being able to implement teleports in the middle of combos, for example. Grabbing an enemy, teleporting to the ceiling, and throwing him down from there. I don't know, something. Deadpool also has the ability to parry enemy attacks if the dodge button is pressed at the right moment, but honestly, it would have been better if this mechanic didn't even exist. Most of the time it simply doesn't work and you teleport instead. And when it does work, we get a pretty bland animation. It's nowhere near the brutal parry animations we see in Batman Arkham or the fluidity of Spider-Man. Fortunately, one thing that makes the game more fun that I haven't mentioned yet is the moments when the gameplay changes to some minigames and silly interactive moments simply for the sake of being absurd and funny. As this happens quite frequently, you find yourself playing in anticipation of the next big scene or joke.
That's for all the clown jokes. That's for never calling just to say hi. That's because I get aroused when I slap people. That's for all the furry midgets in the world. That's because I feel like it. What? Won't you wake up? Wake up!
The game's reception at the time was quite mixed. Although it's by no means a bad game, the general consensus is that it can be very repetitive and that the gameplay might need a bit more polish. The issue of repetition is ridiculed by Deadpool himself, who points out the fact that there are many identical generic enemies and questions if they are clones. The lack of significant exploration in the environments and the lack of replayability were also criticisms that lowered the game's score for some people. However, what ended up being more divisive was simply the game's sense of humor. Since this is completely subjective, at the time the game was released, it was common to see people complaining that the character was too annoying or that they didn't find the game that funny. This character simply is not for everyone. Unfortunately, this game was also another victim of Marvel games published by Activision, as it was also removed from all digital stores in 2017 due to licensing issues. I'm honestly thinking about making a video about this because many classic games, especially Marvel ones, have been lost over time, and that's sad. I know this ending might have seemed a bit too negative, but I would like to make it clear that despite these issues, I still recommend Deadpool the game to anyone who has the chance to play it. It's a great game for fans of the character or Marvel in general who want to simply turn off their brains, kill some dudes, and have some laughs.
Yowza! Rogue is messed up!
She needs to absorb our healing factor through skin contact.
Yes!
Rogue, there's no time to explain, but we gotta suck face like there's no tomorrow. Oh, I'll be gentle and darling.
Hey! Holy shit!
Is that even legal?
Rogue! Baby! You're sucking too much of my...
Oh, my.
Okay, although I wanted to talk about the best game for each character, as a little bonus, I also wanted to mention some games where you can play as both of them, if that's what you want. Starting with X-Men Legends 2, Rise of Apocalypse, Deadpool can be unlocked after defeating Apocalypse or simply by using a cheat code. This was the Mark's first apparition in a game, and you can create your own team with him, Wolverine, and whoever else is playable there. You can also play as both in the 3 Ultimate Alliance games. Unfortunately, except for Ultimate Alliance 3, released for the Nintendo Switch, all of these other games have also been delisted from digital stores. Yay! Another classic game where both Wade and Logan are playable is of course Marvel vs. Capcom 3. One of the best fighting games of all time, and most importantly, it can still be bought. Another game is, well, Marvel Snap. I guess you can have both Wolverine and Deadpool in your deck. That counts, right? But seriously, don't play this game, it's too addictive. And finally, one of my favorite games of 2022, which unfortunately will never have a sequel because it sold very poorly, but it's actually very good and underrated, Marvel's Midnight Suns. Seriously guys, give this game a chance. Both Wolverine and Deadpool are fun on this one, I promise. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Click.